Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this Monday night, April 24th in-depth ag forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. Today's satellite imagery showed us a lot of things about where this pattern is going and what it's been up to as of late. A couple of things I took note of today is just look at the extensive convection over Florida. And remember, most of this spring and late winter, Florida was under drought, and lately we've seen some very large thunderstorm clusters that have hit southern Florida. You can see some of them popping up right now. In fact, there's still a severe thunderstorm watch out for this. We are still watching that deep low that we talked all about last week that's still moving here over eastern Canada. But it was fun to watch today on satellite. Look right into here, see all the waves in the cloud field. Those are gravity waves that are actually in a relatively statically stable layer here. But to the north of it, open-celled convection. Very neat combination of cloud fields. But the other things I've been watching for here is to kind of get a sneak peek of how much snow is still in the mountains, and I'm watching very carefully this low that's coming out of Idaho and it's heading down toward Colorado, and what this is going to mean over the next couple of weeks in terms of setting up this corridor for having some really wet weather that eventually finishes here in toward the east and northeast. So that's going to be a main topic. But where we have all of this cloud cover right now, over the weekend we didn't, and we had high pressure, clear skies at night, and as a result the temperatures really bottomed out. Now we talked about the big frost event in this morning's report that happened in Kansas, the freeze event that happened on Sunday morning. These are Monday morning's temperatures, where those clouds were coming in, the temperatures came up. But you can see throughout Nebraska, parts of Iowa, Missouri, Illinois, down in Kentucky, Tennessee, and most of the eastern Corn Belt, and then north of that, we did have this morning a pretty hard freeze. In fact, some places spent several hours, 6 to 12 hours, this far south, that had temperatures below 32 degrees Fahrenheit. So there's a lot of question on what that did to the crop. Now, later today, I drove this afternoon. That's why I'm doing this a bit late, but I had to drive from Champaign to Chicago and back this evening. And on my way there and back, I actually counted 40 planters rolling here on Interstate 57. So there's this question about, are these temperatures really beginning to warm up, and are they going to stay warm up, and is now the time to plant, or should we wait? And I'm never the one to make those decisions. I'm only going to convey the weather side of this to you. But I saw a lot of people moving in this area. So let's kind of talk through this a little bit. First of all, where do we have our freeze risk going into tomorrow morning on Tuesday? Right now, the National Weather Service has identified, parts of Indiana, Ohio, up to Pennsylvania, and then down the spine of the Appalachian Mountains, back in eastern Tennessee, Kentucky, and West Virginia. So this is the area we're watching. The other piece to this I'm keeping an eye on is this system that's coming down here across the Front Range. And you can see where we have winter storm warnings out for that. On the backside, flood because of the heat coming into the west. First real heat for the western United States all year. And you notice along the Red River, several of the tributaries to the Mississippi, we've got flood warnings out on the river. Now, I just want to show you something here. I know I've kind of often show you this tool, but I want to make sure you see all of the functionality of it, because I will be making some major changes to this over the next month or so, and I'm excited to do that. But if we were to just go to Ohio, and we're curious, okay, we got a freeze warning out for Ohio. Why would we have that? Well, if you come over here, and I'm just going to pick a town in southern Ohio, like Chillicothe. So I started typing it in. I found it here, Chillicothe, Ohio. Puts the index number in there, 1519, and click submit. And right now my system's generating a custom forecast for us. Now, what I want to show you is, you got stats up here, right? Like the average temperature for the next 7 days, 49 degrees. That's 5 degrees colder than normal. You got precip stats. You have your precipitation range, and you can see each of the 7 days. But I love what I've got down here at the bottom for you. What I want you to do in this case is click on two things if you're in these freeze areas. Click on the year-to-date GDDs. Because when you do this, you're going to see an envelope representing the last 20 years on average. You're going to see recent years in dashed lines. Current year is solid. Now, these blue bars represent historical frost events, so it's a histogram. I'm just adding up the number of times in the last 40 years there's been a frost on a specific day, like April 28th. That particular day has had 3 times in the last 40 years where we've had our last frost on that date. What I want you to see is that we're only about halfway through the climatological number of frost events. So to see a frost here on the second half of the distribution is why we're getting the freeze and frost warnings out. Plus the temperatures are really coming down. You can see that by looking at the 10-day multi-model temperatures, which is right here. So this is Tuesday morning. You see we got temperatures way down here, 33, and so we expect low-lying areas to have a frost. Now what we're going to talk about is, how long are these warm-ups going to last? When we cool back down, do we just keep bouncing 1 week after another with the temperature pattern? Because to be honest with you, right now, we look out there and start to see cooler air coming back, May 2nd, 3rd, 4th. We have to ask if there's more frost still coming. So all of this contained in the site, just a great tool that I hope you all can use. I've got 30,000 cities in the test bed, and I hope that they're all getting used. Okay, the main story is told in the pattern. So troughs are in blue, ridges are in red. And I think our biggest story is not necessarily what's happening in the Pacific. I think the Pacific is open, but it's this blocking setup here. See this omega block? That's what that letter looks like, or that line looks like, the Greek letter omega. I think we're going to keep the Pacific open and moving, the jet stream, but the downstream omega block stays there through much of this week. So I'm all the way out to Friday. And what do we see? Trough, trough, trough. The Pacific is moving, but cold air is coming in here while a large ridge builds over the west coast. Now, what is keeping this ridge from being eroded and shoved out of the way by these troughs is that downstream of it, we still have an omega block. And that's about 5 full days of it already at this point. As we keep playing this out, we need to see if it's going to be around for 10 days. So we just keep stretching it out. And as far as I can go, I continue to see some sort of block. I mean, there's a lot of it. There's a lot of waves out there in the Atlantic. So the Pacific is opening up, sending systems through. But this ridge right here is going to spend at least 7 or 8 days over the west before it gets shoved into the midsection of the country. So this is going to determine how long the central United States and the eastern United States are going to stay cold while the western United States goes over warm. But I will make note that once you get out there about day 10, we see this pattern. That opens warmth into the midsection of the country. But to be honest, this is one of the most attractive weather patterns for storm chasers. Troughs ejecting out of the Four Corners states does 2 things. This pulls moisture back far into the high plains. We'll talk about that in a second. It sets up the dry line to be the most kind of volatile frontal boundary. Systems will come off of this, they'll feed on the warmth, and the pattern will go active. The east will be the last place for the colder air to get out. So this is the pattern analysis we need to think about. Now, as I said, we're going to go into this big ridge throughout this week. This is just all the way to Friday now. That ridge is large in the west. We expect a lot of snow melt out of this, and there's a lot of snow on the ground out there. Got a good snapshot of this on Saturday. There was a lot of cloud cover along the Willamette Valley, getting into Washington, but you could see the snow throughout much of the Intermountain West, including the Sierra Nevada. And as we've been keeping tabs on this, it's just a reminder that right now, much of the mountains in the west are still well above climatological normals in terms of snowpack. In some places, 150 to over or almost 500% of normal snowpack right now. In fact, that place we're sitting on there is at 619. So it's just amazing to see how much snowpack is there. So the flood issues throughout the west are going to start to become real again. No longer any precipitation come from the atmosphere. It's just going to be melting snow. And so we've been preparing for this, and now it's time to keep a very close eye on that snow melt happening. From here, I want to show you what kind of snow we still have in the upper Midwest in the northern plains. So this is where we have snowpack as of today on the 24th. So we're watching this whole region, and we know that a lot of this is going to continue to melt. As you saw earlier, we already have a lot of regions that are in flood along the Mississippi and its main tributaries. And if I just hone in here on the river gauges that are currently showing flood, I've seen some reports that here along the Mississippi in Minnesota and Wisconsin, some of the rivers, the river depth at some of the locations on the Mississippi are right now in the top 5 highest on record. So we're going to continue to watch that water move south, and any additional precipitation on the basin is going to continue to cause flooding. But there is more snow still to melt here. Okay, I was on a line of discussing with you temperatures. Can I show you what they look like by doing the model blend first? The ensemble blend first. So this is the next 5 days, and you can already see the warmth coming into California, out of Arizona, into parts of Oregon and Washington. As I slide forward, there's a solid 10 days of this. Now, what we need to watch in this pattern is for when the trough redevelops here. Because when that occurs, the ridging that was over the west gets pushed in this direction and finally dislodges some of the cold that is here. Much of the next 10 days, all the way out to about April 3rd, 4th, 5th, are going to be cold if you are east of the Rocky Mountains, colder than normal. We'll talk about if it's going to be prohibitive to doing field work, especially in the Midwest, in a few moments. But I want you to see that the pattern is going to open up and keep moving. And I've been really racking my brains trying to understand what is controlling this. I've looked at the MJO. I've looked at Northern Hemisphere high latitude blocking. I've looked at this, just the net momentum of the jet stream flow. We've talked about El Nino. And what I'll make a statement about here is that while I've seen the Atlantic getting blocked more easily, the Pacific has not. I think we're on a progression of patterns going into the front half of May that are going to be open, a week on, week off. I think that's what we're going to see, and I'm going to make a case for that here in a few moments. First, I want to talk about the frost threat still coming. So we're going to look at each morning for the next 10 days, so bear with me here. And I'm going to be mostly concerned, because we know the west is going to be mild, I'm going to be mostly concerned with the Midwest to the east. This is Tuesday morning. So this is where we're expecting those temperatures to get down there to that 32 degrees Fahrenheit and below. So we're looking at these hard contours here. Let's skip forward to Wednesday morning, which is here. Again, upper Midwest through Michigan into this part of Ontario. We then take a look at what Thursday morning is going to be. Still chilly, but we notice that the frost threat is pretty far to the north on Thursday. We then take a look at Friday morning's temperatures. There we go. This is when we have our next wave coming through the Rockies. I can't wait to show you that one here in a few moments. Then we take a look at what Saturday morning looks like. Now we got a frost behind this front that's going to stretch right down here through parts of South Dakota into Nebraska, Kansas, and eastern Colorado. We then go into the weekend. This is now Sunday morning. Here we get into Monday morning. And on May the 2nd, right here, I'm going to watch for another potential shot at some really cold air behind this cyclone that's going to come through. So we go out there to May the 3rd, and we still see this. Now, I know you're looking at that going, okay, you told me to only look behind the contour, but that's a whole lot of 30s in this area. Not below 32, but 30s. So can we keep an eye out on May 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, starting in the west and progressing east in this pattern? I don't think we're done with our last frost in this area just yet. Okay? So we'll keep analyzing it, but that's just the latest statement I want to make about it. If we take a look at soil temperatures, it's kind of interesting to see this afternoon after such a cold morning. We saw soil temps move up, especially in like Iowa and Illinois. They warmed up 20, 25 degrees with that strong sunshine that came through. What we need to keep an eye on is that as we progress into this cooler air, we're watching a lot of these overnight 4-inch soil temperatures getting back down into the 40s. They pop back up into the 50s the next day. They go back into the 40s and then pop back up in the 50s. I mean, you just see the routine here of what we're doing with these things. What I'm watching and waiting for is just for it to get above 50 and stay above 50. And as we just play this out there into that second shot at colder air, I know I'm kind of playing this fast, but you come out there to Tuesday morning on the 2nd of May, and again, we just see the effect of that cooler air that's in here. By the way, don't forget, you can click on your soil conditions, and I graph out for you in red what I think the soil temperature is going to be from the ECMWF model. So we can see where they sit. And there's that 50-degree line. So just to add a little context there. All right. I'm going to make a case for why I think we're going to watch the next probably 4 weeks, which gets us through most of May, be a week-on, week-off setup. We've noticed the Pacific Ocean is open and moving with the jet stream, but the Atlantic's getting blocked up. So we're seeing the PNA, that's the Pacific North American pattern, go positive. That's a ridge over the west. And then dip back into a trough. That's where we have a negative PNA and like that California trough. And then possibly rebound. And it's happening on the cadence of about once a week. We look out there and we say, well, what's helping to reinforce this? Because we have El Nino developing rapidly. We've been talking about this a lot in recent videos. But there's still this negative PDO signal, Pacific Decadal Oscillation. So let's translate all of this to make this make sense. Normally, when we see an El Nino going, the jet is just moving here. But what we're seeing it do is it's occasionally getting forced to stop and slow down out in the open Atlantic. That's where we at least see the blocking this week. So what that's doing is that's dipping a trough here and bunching up a ridge there and sending a trough here. And then what happens is it all blows through. And then we get some ridging over the west. And now there's a trough over the east. Can you see what I'm saying? The pattern keeps opening and then shifting 180 degrees out of phase. And so we end up getting this ever-changing state, which means I can't lock this down and just tell you, oh, the next month is going to look like X. What I'm telling you right now is that the next month looks like a variety of weather conditions. And we can get evidence of that by looking at zonal momentum. You see, to keep a pattern open and going, you've got to have high momentum in the atmosphere. All of this is the gaining of El Nino. These are the strong, right along the equator, westerly winds that are coming back in this direction. But you see up here, pushing in at those mid-latitude areas, stronger winds as well. And so what I think what's going to happen here is with high momentum, we're going to keep the pattern open and flowing. We are at times going to see the jet retract and then extend, retract and then extend. But overall, I see it staying right here in about its mean position, right in this general vicinity. So extract, extend, extract, extend. We also can take a look at the global relative atmospheric angular momentum. And we see again, the models are forecasting into May the values to stay high. So this is what the regular kind of overturning of the pattern is going to do. So I don't think we're ever just going to get set. So my reason for telling you this is when a window opens, let's go after it. Because in addition to all of this, I like to use the MJO as well. I think it's going to just keep moving around. I think we're going to see it making progress, moving through the phases. In fact, this is one of the best ways to view this. A Hofmuller diagram that shows slant like this over a 15-day time period, that is an active and moving MJO. Nothing is trapping it into place right now. So, I know this may feel like a cop-out, but just be prepared for change. Once we get into May, much of the country has lost its risk of frost. It's only the far northern tier of the United States and the high elevation in the west that still has it. But this means more routine weather systems going forward. That's the main takeaway. I don't agree with this. This is the newest update from the European model looking out there for the month of May. And you can see it's colder west and it's colder east. By how much? A couple of degrees. I think there's too much in this forecast of an initialization issue in the model to start things off. And I hope that I'm wrong. I hope that the model is wrong and that we do open up more warmth to the U.S. to get this crop really going. But, I trust the European model for a reason. So I'm going to have to watch this carefully to see how it shakes down this pattern as we go forward. All right. Okay, from here, I do want to point out that the week 3, week 4 outlook from the European CPC, shows this. And I want to tell you something. I know this is a 2-week window we're looking at here in this, May 6th through May 19th, but I wouldn't put a lot of money on this verifying exactly as the maps are saying. I think we're going to have a cool shot to start, then this is all going to be replaced with warmth. There'll be cooler air that comes into California, replaced with warmth. That's what I mean by this open and moving pattern. All right. Lastly, I want to show you the CFSV2. Now, we know that over the next couple of weeks, especially the next 10 days, we've got colder air east, warmer air to the west. But we also know that after the next 10 days, that starts to break down, and the cooler air returns to California. We open up warmer temperatures across the rest of the country, in fact, most of North America. And here's again, May 15th to the 21st. So my point is, open and moving, and notice how none of the models actually agree with one another. They all have a different solution for it. So, sometimes we just don't have the clearest signals on where it's going to go, and we're going to watch it day by day. So speaking of day by day, this is what I'm watching right now. This is the shortwave trough that's going to bring the first round of rain to a place that's been extremely dry for almost a solid year. I'm talking about not measuring much precipitation going all the way back to July. It will be reinforced by this trough. Now, the reason why these bigger players aren't working is because this is going to come through the flow and come right back down here over the developing ridge that'll be building into the west. So the trajectory of these next couple of systems as this ridge builds in is to come through like this, sending troughs over the Four Corner States, which is where we've been discussing that we need them to cure this drought issue. Not cure it, let me rephrase that, to help work at it, to get rid of it. What we're looking at here is from last July the 1st all the way until April 24th, precipitation ranks by climate district. And what your eye should be drawn to is Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas. These climate reporting districts along the southern part of Kansas, northern part of Oklahoma, and western part of Oklahoma are having a top 2 driest such time periods on record. We've talked extensively about that drought. And in fact, it was pretty amazing over the weekend. We were all watching some satellite data. Now, this was here in Texas. And as the loop plays, hopefully I can get it to square up here. This is just an amazing video of, there it is, the dust storm that swept across parts of Texas. We've just seen time and time again these. This comes from the Cooperative Institute for Research in the Atmosphere, CIRA, a great place to go see some amazing satellite data. All right, here's our story. Those next two waves over the next 10 days deliver snow here. Let's try redrawing that. There, and then opens this up to rain. These systems then dive into the south, end up in the southeast, and soak New England. There's a drier swath on the back side of it. Drier, I didn't say dry, but drier. That's your probability of getting an inch of rain over the next 10 days. We can step this up. This is the probability of getting 2 inches. This is moisture coming into an area that has not measured much in almost 200 days. So this is a critical forecast as we go forward. We do expect to have some strong to severe storms in Texas this week, but following that line right here from eastern Colorado, southeastern Colorado, into this part of eastern Texas. This is day 2, so this is on the 25th, and then we get out there to the 26th, and we're going to watch this area again. All right, let's get into some of the details. I'm going to pull up the 18Z NAM from Monday, get this queued up this evening. There we go. So scattered showers all throughout this area, even some snow showers still in parts of Wisconsin, but scattered showers here. There's the big thunderstorms over Florida. Here's that wave coming out of Idaho and Montana. Okay. By the time we get into Tuesday morning through Tuesday midday, the frontal boundary is established. This will be the axis along which the system will ride. Heavy snows in the Rocky Mountains and along the Front Range, and the system comes out through the day on Tuesday into Wednesday morning, and we're going to stop this out there by Thursday at 1 a.m. So this is the system that's delivering the first round of decent precip. And you know, to the south of it, we're going to be watching for the severe storms again on Wednesday night here. All right, to see where this goes from there, I got to show you the European model on the right versus the GFS on the left. So let's take you back. So we're watching through Tuesday into Wednesday. Watch the low coming down through here. And while that low sneaks south, there is a little clipper coming through parts of Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. Its front will come through the northern plains, bringing in some cooler rain up there midweek this week. I'm talking Wednesday into Thursday morning. Now, after this system rolls out, it's going to soak the southeast and the mid-Atlantic, including the Carolinas. But as we normally see, watch, the GFS is quicker getting this out. The European lingers. So this is Thursday morning, going into Friday morning, getting into Saturday morning. Do you see how the European was slower? European also takes the next system, that's that wave over Alaska I showed you a few moments ago, and dips it farther to the south, while the GFS keeps it farther to the north, over parts of Missouri, Kansas, Nebraska, Iowa, and Illinois. But that system rolls through. Now, this is where the models get a little hairy on the details, because you notice the European model sends 2 separate waves, one to the south, one to the north. The GFS wraps them both up over Lake Michigan. And the GFS wants to bring in some snow on the backside of this. That's a big question mark. This is the 30th of April. We'll have to watch to see how this shakes down. But if we just keep playing it out through the weekend, we expect this low to deepen over the eastern Great Lakes. There will be another shot at cold air. So this is the low that delivers that next shot at cold air we talked about, sweeping through where I just drew these arrows on the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. And there it is. And then, after the 3rd, the pattern opens up to warmth. We get farther past those last climatological frost states, and we see hopefully much wider windows going forward. So here we are. Total precipitation from the European model. I'll play this out and stop it out at here at 1 week. There it is. So that's 1 week out. Notice that the models, there's that 2-inch color. We have some local areas in there that get some very heavy rain, stretching through parts of the Tennessee Valley, down into the southeast, and then the Carolinas and Virginia. Now remember, most of spring Virginia, Maryland were in drought, and now we're bringing in moisture. Where are we drier? On the northern side of this. That's where we have the convergence and the flow of the jet. It's just drier in this area. Except, remember, the GFS takes the next system, instead of bringing it down here, loops it right into Iowa and Illinois. So that's why over the next 7 days, the European is much drier in here than the GFS is. All right. Another thing to think about as we start to wrap this up. We've covered the long range already, but can you see how there's another trough developing here with a ridge in the middle part of the country? That is the same pattern that was forecast. Watch this, out to day 10 by the European model. Trough, ridge, trough. That's pretty strong model agreement out that far. What is compelling about this pattern is what it might do to open up the warm sector here to a lot of severe storms going into May. So after May the 3rd, warmth builds into the mid part of the country. And I think those that are just waiting to get these cold soil temperatures out and to get things trying to establish and get going, that's the week that's going to make a big move. It's going to be that week of May 3rd to maybe May 10th and then beyond, because we redevelop a trough off the west coast. All right, I don't have any really long-range stuff for you tonight because we've talked about that in the last 5 videos. So we're going to just go from here and have a quick look at the last update on the precip for week 2. Remember, this contains that second system coming through here. We see it also in the European model, drier in the interior where it's colder, but moisture coming in here. And then the last thing I want to show you is where it's hot. So if you look across the northern hemisphere, it's India and it's eastern half of the United States that are cold. There's the mild weather over the next 10 days building in the west, but take a look at this part of Africa and Spain. Now, in the Iberian Peninsula, there are some forecasts later on this week of temperatures getting above 40 degrees Celsius. That's over 100 Fahrenheit. Notice the heat that is also just north of Kazakhstan, getting into parts of the Russian wheat belt here. Very, very hot. And on the precip side, hot and dry in Spain. The precip's in the interior, and it's also here in parts of the Russian wheat belt, but the heat is over this part of Kazakhstan. South America, drier over the Amazon, near normal rains throughout much of Brazil, heaviest rains in central Brazil, still dry along the Paraná River. So we transition into spring. The pattern's got a tremendous amount of momentum in it, and therefore we're going to have to watch the volatility in this pattern each day. So thanks for giving me a lot of extra time tonight. Hope you have a good rest of your week, and I'll talk to some of you early on Tuesday morning. Thanks.